Welcome back to the Draft FC podcast, the podcast website and YouTube channel dedicated to all things official Draft FPL. My name is Mitch and I'm your host for another trip along our Road to Draft Day series 2025 as we continue to tour all 20 Premier League teams. We've already released 3 episodes now. We're over halfway through, and this episode going to be probably one of the more packed ones in terms of the number of teams. We're going to cover 5 teams today, Kiran and I, who I'm once again joined by. How are you doing, Kiran?
Good. Yeah, like you said, it's a packed episode, but we've also got the big Spurs rundown, which I'm sure all the listeners are excited to hear about from you.
Yeah, well, I hope not to disappoint. I've gone a bit flat on the old Spurs with an injury that happened the other day, so we'll see. So yeah, today we are planning on covering Newcastle, Nottingham Forest, Spurs, West Ham, and Wolves, which will only leave us with the 3 newly promoted teams who we will cover in their own episode. Before we jump into the teams, it would be remiss of us not to talk to you about what we've got going on at Draft FC on our companion website, draftfc.co.uk. Over there, you'll be able to find our top 240 draft rankings. You'll be able to get access to the global draft data, which is pulling in from all the drafts that are happening worldwide to distill that into the table as well. Our predicted lineups currently are only in there for members. We haven't pushed that to the front of the main site yet. The live draft helper tool is going down well. It's the first summer we've had that, which means that as you are drafting live, it will automatically tick off players from the ranking. You also get a beautiful draft board at the end showing you all of the picks and all of the teams, which you can nicely share around, which was designed by our resident-in-chief designer, Kiran. And as well as that, you get last season's data. Taz has managed to get all of the defensive contribution points, the Seabird data in there for you to have a look at. And of course, you get access to our exclusive Discord server, where it continues to pop off with lots of draft chat and a really good resource for help when our episodes don't quite cover what you need. Anything else to add there, Kiran?
The only thing I'd add is that the rankings are obviously going to help those managers that have got drafts still ahead of them. But even if your draft is behind you, seeing where Mitch is kind of rated forwards, defenders, that sort of thing, and also seeing how the world is rating those players as well, is still important in having your arsenal as you approach game week 1. Perhaps there's some trades you can do. Perhaps you'll realize that actually you've undervalued someone, and maybe you can try and get them on the cheap. So, yeah, basically, if you started your draft, it's never too late.
Yeah, and I've no doubt some of you that have finished your drafts already will actually have, because when the draft finishes, it kind of is quite jarring. It just cuts straight to your squad, and I know there'll be many of you out there who maybe drafted James Maddison unknowingly, or just didn't really consider what Game Week 1 would require from your teams, because you just went for a load of picks that you like the look of, but actually maybe they don't start the season with some very good fixtures. So you're already, and I know people are already penciling in waivers. So as Kiran said, if you're not sure who may be better than who, obviously fixtures permitting, then the ranking can also be useful for that.
Sorry to bash the United fans again, but you might just have the draft ends. You've faced with your own team, and it's a real sobering sight to realise you picked like 8 Man United players, and you need to start thinking about who else you might want to trade. So yeah, there's lots of reasons to still go get the preseason back.
Yeah, I mean, if they drafted 8, they're probably looking to add 1 or 2 more, I dare say. So yeah, which is where the predicted lineups come in helpful. I know there are lots out there, but we're proud of ours, and yeah, we'll continue to fiddle with those lineups and the rankings right up until game week 1. Yeah, so let's jump into the first team for today, which is Newcastle, a team who are very much in the transfer headlines, particularly around one player in particular who we don't really need to say who that is, because we'll come on to him in just a second. Not a huge amount of business, it has to be said. One key addition is probably Elanga for the outfielders, and they've also added in familiar goalkeeper Ramsdale to bolster their goalkeeper ranks, because Dubravka has left and signed for Burnley. So we'll no doubt cover that when we discuss Burnley in the newly promoted teams. But I think there is really only one place to start here, and Kieran's put a little teeny tiny at-risk flag on Isak's name there, which is possibly underselling it. All the reports are suggesting that what's been quite a few weeks of a transfer saga are culminating in him forcing through a move to, it looks like, Liverpool. All the rumours have been pointing in that direction, and that's where they seem to continue to point. What do you make of that situation? We've obviously touched on it a little bit when we're talking about the forward merry-go-round, but in terms of Newcastle, what do you make of it?
Newcastle fans must be really struggling with this transfer window, because after basically a pretty poor summer last year and all the sort of upheaval and Paul Mitchell and all that sort of stuff, they were looking forward to actually going and getting some of their targets. And it's like they've been bullied, and they know that. It's like they wanted Ekatike, didn't happen. They wanted João Pedro, didn't happen. There's probably countless others that I can't even think of right now, but there's just all these players that they wanted to get, and then someone else just stolen them from under their nose. Old Trafford is another one. They were a bit linked with for ages. Alanga is the one that they have got, and Isak is sort of the cherry on top. Is that they've then ended up in a situation where their best player wants to leave as well. Where do we go with this? It's going to be impossible to replace Isak. It looks like he must be going the way that it's all sort of been handled. I just don't see a massive contract from PIF being the answer, though it could be. But in terms of Isak as an asset, whether he ends up that 5% chance that he ends up staying here or he goes to Liverpool, I don't see there's a massive, like I think we were discussing it last pod. There's not really a massive difference between him. So like that's one thing for Isak, and then specifically around the striker position at Newcastle. They've been looking at Sesko, heavily going after Sesko, another player that it looks like they've been bullied out of, because Man United should have bid 85 million, which I think is too much for Sesko, but I digress. They have been linked with Jackson. They have been linked with other forwards like Visser and another forward that's named escapes me. It just doesn't feel like it's enough for a team that finished fifth last season and is going to the Champions League. So yeah, their attack is looking quite problematic, I would say. And if I was to guess, or I'll remove that at risk because it's not linked. If I was to guess how they might line up in game week 1, maybe something like this. I would guess. I guess Gordon might play there for a couple of games while they figure out who the hell's coming in. Your thoughts on the striker position, Mitch?
Yeah, I mean the other name obviously is Callum Wilson. They've lost, so they've also lost their main backup and a player who's done a really solid job for them over the last few seasons. So I've no doubt he will get mentioned this season in a West Ham shirt when we're looking for forward options. But yeah, I mean, the Isak situation, I sort of, it's not quite the Kane situation, because Kane had been at Spurs for a long, long time and didn't really owe Spurs anything when it came to the time he was leaving. I guess if you are a Newcastle fan, you just get into the Champions League again and kind of feel like you're trying to take that step up, but I guess it's just that cold reality of that cliff edge between the likes of Liverpool, Chelsea, Man United, the teams that have got huge revenue income, and the likes of Newcastle, Aston Villa, just not quite on that level, unfortunately. So yeah, as we said in the Liverpool episode, I don't think it changes where we draft Isak too much. You may get slightly cold feet and he goes down 1 or 2 positions. Equally, in that kind of top 5, as we keep calling it, I think if you're on the clock and you maybe had Isak as your number 3, and in the end get a bit cold feet and take one of the others, like a Saka or a Palmer, I don't think it's going to really make or break your season. So if you just want that safety net, I wouldn't blame you. And I can see Isak falling to maybe 5 or 6 in quite a few drafts now. So yeah, but I guess it's what it means for the players who remain. The only thing, and we'll talk about this vendors in a minute, I know that there is a bit of a doubt for Hall's fitness for game week 1. So I've already tweaked the Newcastle starting 11 in my predictions. So currently I've got Trippier coming in at right back again, Livramento moving out to left, Shaw and Burn in the middle. The midfield 3, as long as they're fit, pretty much pick themselves. The only, I mean, that's as you can see it on screen now for those watching. So Pope, Trippier, Sharburn, Livramento, Bruno Guimaraes, Tonali, Joel Linton, Elanga, Gordon and Barnes is what I've currently got. The main sort of 60-40 decision is in that right wing spot because, Murphy's been excellent for them last year or two. It would not surprise me in the slightest if Murphy started game week 1 and Elanga was worked into it a little bit more. But I think just because of the money and the fact that they haven't really signed any other marquee players and they're going to lose their sort of talisman, then that's the main reason I've got him to start. But they've still got some pre-season games to play, so we'll see how they line up in those. That might give us a couple more clues. But yeah, it's looking really thin, you have to say. If Isak does leave, which it looks like he will, then they are short of a good handful of players, really. Yeah, if you consider that they're a Champions League team this season, that team is nowhere near being robust enough to compete on both fronts. We know Joel Linton's got his injuries. Tonali's obviously had injuries. Their defenders, Trippier, Hall.
Botman's had his injuries. He's injured again.
Yeah, injured again. Even some talk that Botman might get sold because I think they're just not convinced they're going to be able to get what they want from him, or potentially even as drastic as saying he's never really going to be the same as what he was before that injury. So, you could argue they need another fullback who could cover both sides. They need another centre-back. They need another central midfield player. They need 2 strikers. So Vista's an interesting one. He's obviously getting linked to Forest, but I don't see that so much with what they've got on paper at the moment. Newcastle would make sense, but, the calibre of strikers, if they do miss out on Sesko, Vista would not be the out-and-out first choice. I think they'd end up rotating a lot. So would really devalue Vissa, I think, depending on who else they bring in. If Vissa signs tomorrow, I think he almost nudges up the rankings a couple of spots. And then if Newcastle did manage to secure Sesko's signature, then he probably sinks down again. So yeah, but Elanga's a good signing. And like we've said on some of the other, particularly on the Man United episode, how much they paid doesn't make any difference to us on draft day. He is just a name on the board that we can choose. He had a very productive season last year. I think this system will suit him. Newcastle have been looking for a Murphy backup / competition / upgrade for 2 or 3 years now. So it makes sense. So yeah, I could see him Elanga having a good season, and I've got him decently high in my draft rankings at the moment.
Yeah, I was shocked to learn that Jacob Murphy is 30 years old. So I was really surprised why they kept going after Elanga, but it kind of makes sense. It's like 23. Yeah, I completely agree with all your points. I think the layer on top I'd put is that Eddie Howe and this group of players seem to just make it work, and just keep getting clean sheets, keep scoring goals, no matter who he puts up there. It's like one week he'll put Joe Linton at left wing and it'll work. He'll put, because Willock is out. And the amount of wingers they have, and this did happen towards the end of last season, but he'll let's say Bruno is injured, and they'll do something like this where they only have 2 real fit defenders. They'll move Livramento into a sort of wing back position, and they'll bring in someone like your Jacob Murphy and Lascelles. We still need to see if he's going to be back to anywhere sort of how he was playing a few seasons ago, but this is something that could end up being something that Newcastle look like, and it just based off just getting an injury to a centre midfielder, that sort of thing. Ideally, they would rather Miley went out for another season, went out on loan, but they just don't have the body, so they have to keep him.
He'll stay,
and I think some of the other things, like in terms of at risk, we had one on Livramento, but looks like the valuation between what Man City are willing to pay and what Newcastle want perhaps means that he stays. We've got an at risk on Pope because they've signed Ramsdale, and potentially Ramsdale as a better distributor of the ball starts playing more games, or they could also decide that one of them is a cup keeper. I'm not sure. I think their interest in Trafford shows that they want to move towards a different goalkeeping style. So I think Pope may lose his spot at some point this season. And we had one on Barnes. This is purely due to the fact that he was rotating quite a lot with Gordon last season. I was looking at the stats earlier, only 17 starts, but 130 points. And that's pretty bang average for what Barnes usually does with 30 plus starts. So he had a really good season last season, but he's just not starting. And two doesn't go into one. And I wonder if that is one of the players that Newcastle would actually be able to move on to start funding all these other positions that they need. They need Visser, they need a main striker, probably a centre fielder, definitely a centre back. There's a lot to be desired. But the reason, I'll reiterate again, the reason I showed this is that Eddie Howe has a way to make it work and get clean sheets and points. And yeah, he's done it a few times with Newcastle now. So this is unlike the Brighton situation where it was like, don't know who plays, they don't get points. We pretty much know who's going to play and they're going to get points, is my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he squeezes every bit of potential out of that team. I think he's underrated, and given what a shit show their sort of board and front office is, otherwise they're really fortunate to have him. I think if they made a silly decision, if some of the results started to go badly and they got rid, I think they'd seriously regret it. But yeah, they're just like I don't know about selling Barnes. I feel like if they're going to be a serious team compete in Europe as well, they need to keep Barnes. I think if you sell Isak, you can definitely fund 3, maybe 4 bodies to come in. I mean, they're not going to be obviously 60, 70 million ready-made players, but a couple of 40 million players and a couple of 25 million pound players, you know, they've got to be realistic. They're gonna have to be young prospects. But yeah, and then obviously Livramento is the other one. It's really cooled off actually, hasn't it? But links to Man City were very strong. I don't see it happening now, just because I feel like if City really wanted him, they'd have got him.
Yep, another old Chelsea head. Just as almost every we're going to Nottingham Forest next, so it's just every team at this point, considering the amount of sales we do, has some Chelsea connection that we could talk about.
Yeah, well, let's move on to Nottingham Forest then. Yeah. Always nice to have a Chelsea segue, isn't it? So, so on screen we have now got Nottingham Forest. It's an interesting squad distribution, which is kind of highlighted exactly in the way you've sort of sketched it out there. There are some definite strong areas in terms of personnel, but there are definitely some much weaker areas. Anywhere you want to start there with Nottingham Forest?
The call out I was going to make was from the 2 top performers from Nottingham Forest last season, which was obviously Wood and Gibbs White. It's almost like an open secret at this point that there is an expectation that Wood is going to be on the bench, almost like they're just trying to push him out to try and get. They've got Visser, got this Igor Jesus. So 200 points looks fanciful for Wood to get again next season, but I've written him off before, and look where that got me. The other one I'd mention is Gibbs White, so I've obviously got him in a more of like a creative number 10 role here, but he plays everywhere and anywhere for this Forest side. Sometimes in a more right centre midfield role. Sometimes I think he will play on this sort of left wing, rotating with Hudson-Odoi. He's going to be the top points scorer for Forest this season, and it's a great, not addition, but like coup for them to be able to hold on to him this season. Thoughts on anything I just said, Mitch?
Yeah, I've got Wood. I mean, you know, I think for now he is still their starting striker, so his value holds, but he is not going to get anywhere near the output that he got last season. So he's another one where I say do not be drafting him based on what he put up last year. I'm just looking now. He overperformed his XG by just over 4. Yeah, I don't think long-term Forest and Nuno want to stick with Wood. And I think last year he was so prolific. They just carried on with him. Obviously, they've lost Elanga to Newcastle and brought Ndoye in, who... My main takeaway really is that he's just a cheaper, more of a prospect version of Elanga. So it kind of makes sense. He'll sort of do exactly the same job. They've made a decent profit because I think they paid around half of what they sold Elanga for to get him in. So they've obviously pocketed sort of 25 million as if you think about that swap deal, which they can spend on someone else. So yeah, I think the starting 11 is strong. I don't think they've got the strength in depth. And obviously, you could argue they've shot themselves in the foot a little bit by pulling themselves into the Europa League over Crystal Palace, because there is as we can both attest, the difference in quality between the Europa Conference League and the Europa League is huge. And even, I mean, between all three of the European competitions, the drop off is huge. So I think it's this in the opposite way. I look at with Palace, it could actually be a really good outcome for them that they're in the Europa Conference League. They could smash that competition if they take it sort of semi-seriously, even with a relatively thin squad that they've got. They should find most opponents fairly comfortable. Whereas, Forest are going to be going into a lot of games not the favourites in Europe, and they're going to then have to juggle this squad with, the kind of Thursday night, Sunday night rotation, which is not easy. I think the defence is what obviously we think of for this Forest team. Milenkovic and Murillo getting a lot of attention because of how many extra points they would have got last year. And obviously Milenkovic would have finished as the number one defender in FPL last season had they had the extra defensive contribution points with 171, and Murillo really not far behind on 168. So big season, and Murillo played less minutes than Milenkovic. So essentially they had near identical seasons, and will be I think hot property on draft day this year, because they're almost creeping into the premium defender shout, if there is such a thing.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when teams have seasons like this where they're you can look at the XG, you look at the way that they've been performing previously, and just think that like this was an overperformance season, and they're almost going to gravitate back to the norm next season. But lest we forget the Wolves sides that Nuno used to put together, and they would almost always be good for a cleanie. And I think that solid foundation is what Nuno bases his teams off. And while 171 and 168 may be challenging to replicate, I don't think they'll be too far off those higher up positions.
Yeah, it's certainly not impossible. And let's say just the way they play, when they do lose the ball, they drop deep. They drop deep, and then those two are busy bodies in the box. Both of them are trying to clear and tackle. They're not passive by any means, which is why they've done so well would have done so well last year if the defensive contribution points were there. Aina and Williams are going to be useful pickups too. They don't really have a huge amount of competition. Williams got way more of the defensive contribution points than Aina. Probably more of a sign of that we saw Aina be so attacking, and Williams maybe being a bit more defensively busy. And then the other name in that bracket into midfield is Anderson, who's getting a lot of love even in sort of normal FPL heading into this season. So he's a player that I rate. He had a really good year last year. I guess if it wasn't for the defensive contribution points, we wouldn't be talking about him at all, sadly. So he's the sort of player where it's obviously testament to the fact that the defensive contributions are a positive thing for the game, because they open up the possibility of drafting a player like him. So he would have got an extra 36 points. Again, would have pushed him up into that clutch we keep talking about, would have put him on 143 for the season, where, I think it's going to be really congested there.
Competitive.
Yeah, that's not to say they're not valuable. Week to week, these are sort of players I think are going to be going in and out. I think the trick this year is just going to be not holding on to guys like that for too long, knowing that there's always going to be a like-for-like option with maybe a bit more upside. Be interesting if he can add a couple more goals, then really propels him to the top of that pile. But you could say that to all of the guys who are in that bracket. If they can add one or two more goals, it will just put their head above the rest. And it's the same with actually Murillo and Milenkovic. Milenkovic scored 5, whereas Murillo only scored 2. So and Murillo loves a shot. He's got a really good shot on him. So I could see that potentially switching. If I had to pick one of the two, personally, I'd rather have Murillo over Milenkovic, because I think Murillo's due a season where he scores a few, and Milenkovic is probably due a more quiet season on the goal front. But yeah, so they'll both go on draft day. Just don't blink too early.
It just goes to show. So Murillo XG of 1.47, whereas Milenkovic was 4.05, and I think that's just because he was a penalty box fiend for the corners. A couple of things, I guess, to round out is some of the rumored transfers. We got Adama. He's just going to be a backup to Ndoye, in my books, and Douglas Luiz has been linked today as well, but I just don't see that eating into Anderson's minutes. So if Anderson's the one you're looking at, I would still stick with him. I think he's still going to play the majority of minutes. I think potentially Dominguez and potentially a game where Dominguez, Anderson, and Douglas Luiz play together, but it doesn't. I don't think it impacts Anderson's points really. And yeah, I think that's it on Forest.
The one little last thing I say, Igor Jesus is a decent player. I don't think he'll start as the starting number 9, but I think they will look for any excuse to get him in the team. If Wood has a bad couple of games at the beginning, don't be surprised. Sort of game week 3, 4, we see. He is not. Igor Jesus can run. He can press. He can play football. He's not just a tree that's going to get in the box. Which, don't get me wrong, it's worked for them last year. But I think if you looked at how they really want to set up, Igor Jesus lets them do a lot more things. It's just whether he can add the goals.
Yep, I was going to ask that opinion of you, and yep, sounds good. So yeah, let's get on to the big
versatile certainly than Wood, but that doesn't always equate to a good draft FPL pick. So he's a wait and see, definitely. Okie dokie. Let's get on to Tottenham Hotspur. Well, I'll let you start because I kind of started with the Chelsea and then let you round off. So I'll let you start. And maybe I'll round off.
As I was thinking about this episode yesterday, and part of the
we should say when we're recording this, because obviously transfer news can happen any minute, and then we also... So we're recording this Wednesday the 6th at night time. So obviously everything's up to date as of then.
During a nappy change and feed of the night, I've got the Spurs team in my head where I'm thinking about like how it's all going to line up, and looks like Mitch is.
It's good that you finally hit this.
It's not just Spurs. I was thinking about Newcastle as well, because those are the ones we're going to move around.
I wake up thinking of Chelsea players all the time.
So who doesn't? We're linked with everyone on the planet. Yeah, so I was thinking about how Kudus used to play in like as a playmaker at Ajax as well as on the right wing, and he could be a good bridge before Kulusevski comes back from injury. So I think this is the right setup that you've got here, because I think Brennan Johnson was one of the best performers for Spurs last season. So yeah, 137 points. To drop him for Kudus doesn't make sense, and also to waste Kudus on the left wing also doesn't seem to make sense. So I think the sort of format that you've got here works. I haven't read enough about how bad Maddison's injury's likely to be, and I've a question for you about your thoughts on Kulusevski and whether Spurs actually need another number 10 to come in.
Yeah, we do.
So over to you. Okay.
Yeah, no.
And is that Eze, or is there anyone else that's linked or touted?
I don't think it's Eze, only because I think he's got his heart set on Arsenal, and I think if Spurs started going after him, it would just waste time, energy. They'd end up getting embarrassed, and I just don't see that move happening. I think he'd end up dragging his feet, waiting for Arsenal to come in, and it would drag on right until the end of the window. And so I think, well, I hope they're looking at targets that they can actually just pursue and get. It's difficult because obviously teams out there know that there's £60 million seemingly burning a hole in Daniel Levy's pocket. Makes negotiating a little bit more difficult. But yeah, I mean, Maddison's injury we haven't had, as far as I know, any official confirmation on what that injury is. Obviously, the Spurs squad are still out in South Korea as part of that tour. I'm guessing they're pretty much done out there now, so they're probably on their way back soon. But yeah, it looked like a nasty knee injury, off the back of injuring the same knee just a couple of months ago. So I think we shouldn't really count on Maddison until 2026. And that's how I would be drafting. In other words, he is a do not draft. So he's fully been taken out of my top 240 until we get further news. And yeah, like I said, as an example at the beginning, I know lots of managers have got burnt with that who maybe missed that news, who've picked Maddison up. And FPL are not updating those injury flags in pre-season. So he's not got the red flag right now, so he could
the injury flags are not the most important thing for them to be working on. So given what else they've been,
absolutely.
Agreed.
Udogi, I think, is also a bit of an injury doubt for early season now too. Still waiting for firm news on that. So I think Spence will likely line up as the left back. So yeah, if you wanna get him penciled in. But there are
The question the question I was going to have for you is that Kulusevski is injured for the first couple of games of the season, so he's now fit. Okay, let's ignore that you might sign a center attacking midfielder. So what is happening here? What is going to happen with this lineup?
the key is how Frank sees Tell. Now the way I've got it drawn here, I'm not certain is how. This is where I always say when you support the team, it doesn't always make you an objective analyzer of what they're going to do. I think as it stands, they probably see Tell as a backup to Solanke as a number 9. We've seen Johnson tried on the left a couple of times in pre-season. It hasn't looked right, but obviously he's hardly ever done it. In theory, it should make sense because he's kind of getting in and he can open up onto his right foot, but he just looks way more comfortable on the right hand side. Yeah, one thing I would also just quickly point out for those who've only known Mohamed Kudus as a Premier League player for West Ham, you would think he was a left winger, and obviously Kieran just kind of alluded to the facts that, well, he's not fundamentally. Left wing is probably his third choice, even possibly fourth choice position on the pitch. Obviously, he was playing at West Ham where Bowen was, he's obviously an absolute lock to play off the right, so he just had to play off the left if he was going to get in the team. But he's predominantly a number 10/right-sided attacker. He would probably just as much play like a false 9 position, and then left wing he can also play as well. So he's a good player. Say it's why I'm a fan of the fact that we picked him up. I know he had a bit of a down season last year, but he's versatile, and I think he adds things that the rest of that attack doesn't have, or rather he puts together some of the skill that some of them have with the athleticism that like a Kulusevski just doesn't possess, unfortunately. Yeah, Tell I think is the key for early doors in the season because there are options on the left. He could play Odegaard there. He could play Richarlison off the left. So I definitely see, again, I think Richarlison off the left is far more effective for us than as a number 9 these days, but he can also do that too. The other option, and again, we've seen this in some of the preseason games at the moment, is that Bergvall has played as the sort of out-and-out number 10, and then someone like a Sarr has been one of the sitting 2. We've seen a bit of Archie Gray filling in, but I'm fairly certain João Palhinha is going to be a lock in this team. I really do, and I actually don't mind the signing at all. It's a bit of a stopgap, of course. He's not a young player you can build your team around, but for a couple of years with a reasonable buy option, I think it's like 25 million euros if we want to keep him. Yeah, I mean, naysayers would say, why don't we just keep Pierre Højbjerg? Who, again, I was always more of a fan of than potentially a lot of the Spurs fan base were, because I feel you do need one or two of those guys in the squad. The big thing with Spurs, and it's kind of lazy analysis, but the Wednesday before game week 1 are playing in the Super Cup. So, it would be a big platform for Frank, and he will no doubt be keen to win that. And so the team that lines up in that game, I think will be pretty close to what Frank thinks is the current best team. So that's only a week from, well, as we speak, it will be exactly a week away from now that game will be playing. So I think for Spurs in particular, we'll have, similar to like when we look at the Charity Shield and the teams playing in that as a bit of an indicator of how they're going to set up, that UEFA Super Cup match will give us a good idea of how Spurs are going to line up.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think you may be touch more defensive against PSG than in most Premier League games, but I think it's still a fair shout. Well, yeah, I think we've previously written like one to watch James Maddison because he had a poor season last season, but I think you've explained to me the challenges that a creative player like Maddison feels in a Ange Postecoglou gung-ho sort of side, and there was some excitement of what he might bring to the team in a different style of play. So instead, for me, I guess what I want to watch is more someone like Porro. I think Porro is an excellent right back. I think he's one of the best and creative right backs in the league. Probably not talked about much because we have about 50 English right backs to talk about. But I guess last season he's got 2 goals and 6 assists, and the season before 3 goals and 8 assists, and I think he could do even better than that. And it just depends on how Frank wants to line up this team. If you got Kudus, who's like sort of operating in this area, and Porro sort of overlapping, it could be a really fruitful season for him. So that's my one to watch.
And we've seen Porro on
Any
set pieces too.
Yeah, so yeah, I think he's like an excellent player, and that's the one that I've got my eye on. Kudus, I just don't think you spend £55 million on a player to play him in, like you said, his 4th best position. So I do think that he's new operating off the left and really given that opportunity. And I guess the last point is just don't ignore Solanke. I know no one will because the striker fall is terrible, but last season was the first season in like as the main man at a really big team. I know he's played for Liverpool and Chelsea before. Gotta get my Chelsea mention in. However, he's not been the main man at one of the top 6 clubs. And it was just not the best environment for him to thrive. And I think that Frank will get the best out of him. And he'll return to more his previous season's total, which is 175 points, 19 goals and 3 assists. I really think that's possible for him.
The key thing is keeping him fit. I mean, before he came to us, he had like an impeccable injury record, just never got injured, and obviously had a couple of stints out last year. So that was Ange Ball. Hopefully with a little bit more protection, a bit more rotation, then we can look after him a little bit. The one thing I'll say, as much as I'm saying I can see that 11 starting the Super Cup, I think that 11 also tells you why we desperately need another creative player. You know, we all know what Palhinha's skill set is. Sarr's skill set is just legs, and Bergval's skill set is carrying the ball. So what you don't have in there, apart from Romero, ultimately, is someone who can pass the ball forward between the lines. Porro can do that too, but so what you're looking at on paper there is that your sort of main 2 progressive passers are your right back and your right centre back. So
yeah.
There's only so many lines they're going to break consistently. So otherwise they're passing the ball into those midfielders. And then, you're either looking at your Kudus and Johnson Solanke dropping deeper to get the ball, or you're knocking some long balls over the top, which I'm not against. There's a place for that. And that would be the absolute nightmare for Ange Ball. But I wouldn't be surprised looking at that team on paper if we don't see a lot of the old kind of, from my Spurs memory, the kind of old Alderweireld long diagonal balls going across like Dele Alli back in the day. I think Frank will be saying to Romero and Van de Ven, feel free to be creative. If you see Kudus or Johnson being able to make a run, then try knocking one over the top. So I think we will be pretty direct at times.
Yeah, I agree. And I've just got one last question for you, which is around the goalkeeper position. I think Vicario was pretty much, in my head, locked last season. And then he got injured and obviously forced to play for a time. And then Spurs made a new addition in January where Kinski came in. And Vicario basically took over when he came back. And I don't think he looked quite the same. And just your thoughts around whether he is for sure the starting keeper or whether there is some potential that he could lose his place in the first, let's say, 10 games.
Right now, I'd say there's no potential. Unless he gets injured again, he's number one. I've seen loads of talk about Kinski in kind of normal FPL circles. So people looking for a cheap goalkeeper with I don't see it at all. I mean, there was even talk of Kinski potentially getting loaned out because he may or may not be registered in our Champions League squad because of the limitations on foreign players. And I guess, you can easily take a sort of under 21 English keeper just to fill, make up the numbers. So no, personally, I don't see it. And Vicario is just in a different class when it comes to shot stopping. And I think the kind of passing that Frank's going to expect him to do is a bit safer than the passing that Ange expected him to do. It's not to say we still couldn't do with him being a better passer, but I think you're going to see him looking to sort of spray those medium distance passes to kind of this area here and this area here, which if you overhit it, it goes out for a throw in. If you underhit it, you've still got covering defenders. You're not trying to knock it around with inside the penalty area. So no, I think don't be put off by Vicario and don't be tempted to like sneak Kinski in your other FPL teams.
Yep, fair enough. Cool. Any last words on Spurs?
No, I don't think so. As I said, UEFA Super Cup, and we'll have a lot more info in some of those details and the knock-on effect it has for where those attackers play. Certainly.
Nice. All right, on to West Ham.
Yeah, on to your local boys. Yeah, again, there's a fairly familiar squad of players on paper there, though definitely one new name I want to mention, maybe two. We've seen a bit of West Ham under Potter. Hardly got you going, did it, last year? I guess the ones who are being fair to him are sort of saying, well, maybe he was just using it as a pre-season because West Ham couldn't go down, couldn't get into Europe. We're out of all the cups, so just have a bit of a mess about, really, which perhaps, if we're being kind to... There's one place I want to start, which is the Paqueta situation. Long-term listeners of the pod will know I've been a strong proponent of Paqueta for, as long as he's been in the league now. I think he's always been pretty underrated. It's kind of ticking along with sort of non-penalty XG numbers, which are never going to put him front and centre on draft day, but it can definitely have little runs. And of course, he's had this huge case, which, to be honest with you, I really want to get into the nitty-gritty of the proceedings if and when they get released, because I thought he was dead to rights, basically. And then last week we hear that he was maybe going to get the all clear. We've now heard he has got the all clear. There's still potential for him to get a little punishment. I don't know if you've heard about that, because something to do with evidence and his mobile phone, which at one point they had taken off of him. They then gave it back to him. He may have then deleted some stuff. They then asked for it back. And so, there could be like a minor punishment to do with him then deleting some stuff. But I don't know. It feels like they're just trying to pin him for something at this stage. Either way, it's going to be a massive mood lift for him. We didn't really see what he's about last year because he was thoroughly depressed. I mean, he broke down in the game against Spurs towards the back end of last season. He literally broke down in tears on the pitch when he got yellow carded, which was just so sad and weird to see, completely out of the blue, nothing to do with the game state or anything. So clearly really affecting him for it to spin out like that. And he's committed to staying at West Ham. I'm guessing he's pretty happy with how West Ham have backed him while all this has been going on. So there were rumours he might go, but I think that's been completely quashed. And West Ham don't have a player like him in the team. So I think, given they're not in Europe or having to mess about, I think as long as he stays fit, for me, he's potentially a 38-game starter. It's just to see whether he can get anywhere near his best.
Yeah. I think it's all fair points that it's just been hanging over him. There was a reason why Man City wanted to buy him for 85 million. And there's potential now that he's got that cloud off from over him to start reaching those heights again. So I think that's a really good shout. And lastly, no one else could do that. And to the point where I think if he's not available, I think they actually need to play a different formation. I think potentially need to play Somerville and play more like a 3-4-3 because it's just there's that Ward-Prowse could not fill that role, not even close.
Yeah. Diouf's an interesting signing, their new left wing back. He's pretty much, I think he started all their pre-season games, and there's a match they played a few days ago, I forget who it was against now, where he basically set up one goal and virtually set up the second goal. He kind of assisted the assist with two near identical big swinging in crosses, into the box, which Bowen got on the end of for one, and then Bowen got on the end of for the second one, but tapped it across to Füllkrug. Yeah, it looks like he's got a good, strong left foot on him, which is exciting. I think Emerson's not even in the plans. I don't know if he's going to leave. Kilman was the big winner, but again, he's another one of those busy centre-back moulds, like a Collins, like a Murillo, Milenkovic, Tarkowski. So, he'll no doubt be in and out of our draft teams, but it's that midfield. I'm really not sure if any of those midfielders are players that Potter likes. And actually, one rumour is potentially of him linking up with Basuma again.
Yeah,
which I could
that makes sense.
I could see, because they haven't really got a profile quite like Basuma in there. I've not been convinced by much of what I've seen of Rodriguez or Alvarez, to be perfectly honest with you. But
Same.
yeah,
They look slow and off the pace of the Premier League.
yeah. Then up top, I mean, Bowen kind of speaks for himself. He's obviously a forward this year, so lots of people, myself included, have him very high in the rankings because, again, he's so dependable, hardly gets injured, and even when he did get injured, he was back sooner than we thought. So if he's fit, he's playing 38 games, full 90 minutes. He doesn't get subbed off early. He's a talisman. He can score against anyone. I mean, hopefully we don't need to sell Jared Bowen. Yeah, I've just realised for those watching, it'd be absolutely fine for those listening on the audio, but for those watching, you'll have seen that the screen's stuck on Spurs through a lot of that chat. So I've now moved it onto West Ham. But like I said, a lot of these players are very familiar, so the fact that you couldn't see it doesn't really change too much. But we were just talking about Bowen and saying hopefully we don't have to sell you Jared Bowen. We may have to sell you Fulkrug, though, because it was not the start to his West Ham career he or anyone would have hoped. And of course, there's now some competition with Callum Wilson. So what do you make of that little duo?
These are the two players that they're going to make or break your season.
Bold.
Maybe just says
hot take
about
#1.
My risk profile is like I still don't want to take the risk on these guys. As your third forward, I could take a risk on these guys.
Yeah, but that's
later on in the draft.
Not where they're going.
I know. And it's last season was really poor for Fulkrug. 3 goals and 2 assists in the Premier League, 18 games, and whereas the previous season at Dortmund he played 29 games. But as you look through his history, there's some seasons where he's just not like playing that many games, and then he's joined by Callum Wilson, who is literally the English version of Fulkrug, who can bang 18 goals in a season only a couple of seasons ago, but has from my memory has been mostly injured for. I was surprised to learn he had 18 matches last season. To my mind, he's been mostly injured. So yeah, either of those could pop up with maybe 10 goals this season. I could see that happening. I see them as a third forward. It's hard to take the risk on either of them, especially given that they are not definite starters when both fit either. So that's another risk that you need to, even though it's unlikely that both of them will be fit at the same time. But yeah, it's not one that I'm thinking about. How about you, Mitch?
There are managers out there. There are draft managers out there right now with Fulkrug as their number 1 forward. If they missed the, if they picked up a couple of midfielders in round 1 and 2, that's the kind of forward you're basically left with. Considering, Callum Wilson's draft position is difficult. I think Fulkrug remains number 1. I think he has to be. I don't think it's impossible that you could see all 3 of them on the pitch, Bowen, Fulkrug and Wilson at once. Not very likely, though. So like you said, I think if they're all fit, one of Fulkrug or Wilson is sat on the bench. I think one of them always starts if they're both fit, but one of them pretty much always starts on the bench. So really tricky, and there's no way of predicting which one of them decides to go on a little scoring streak, because they both could. It's just the age profiles. I mean, I made a joke about it the other day, like it's a 33-year-old striker backing up a 32-year-old striker, having lost their old 35-year-old striker, and then the 4th name from last year was Danny Ings. I don't even know how old Danny Ings is now. Who is 33? Well, so he's one of the young ones.
But he was just on a big whack. They needed to get rid of him.
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, you've got Potter sat there now, who has seen the inner machinery at Brighton, and they can't identify some 19, 20-year-old striker from Europe that they can pick up for 25 mil. There must be a dozen. There must be a dozen players that I'm not saying they're going to hit the ground and score 15 goals, but what is the? I'm getting angry, but what is the ambition here? Like, what is the ambition here? What are they expecting Potter to do with some of the most I mean, you just look around the squad. You've got Wan-Bissaka, Ward-Prowse, Souček, Fulkrug, Wilson, Emerson, Aged. Like, these are the most un-Potter, immobile players ever. and they're just not giving him any new players. I mean,
Yeah,
believe me,
I
if they
think.
get Basuma, it ain't going to change things.
I thought you were gonna continue this rant by going after their only signing is Kyle Walker Peters because I know your feelings about him.
He's fine. Do you know
Yep.
what? I think at least he can. He's a multi-tool and he can run. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, and he can play
I've got no
both
problem with
both
them
right
picking him up.
right wing back and left wing back as well. But yeah, it's because obviously Ferguson didn't work out. I completely agree with you that like you'd think that perhaps the backup to Fulkrug would be a striker that has legs. Maybe you could start using Fulkrug as like the last 30 minutes type of striker, and like that maybe just keeps him fit for longer as well. But to have two guys of the same profile makes it feel like that's what Potter is looking for in a centre forward, and we just know that's not true. We've seen Welbeck play in Brighton teams, or we've seen the way that his Brighton teams used to run, and that is just not it. So yeah, I wonder if there are more signings to come, but it's been pretty quiet. I stuck Egghead there, but he was on loan most of the season, so who knows what like
He's
how his
played
line's
all
even
of
going to
their.
look.
He's played all of their pre-season. So as it looks outwardly at the moment, I think, especially
Yeah,
given they're playing a back three now, I think he's in there.
yeah,
Um,
agreed.
I mean, apart from Suma, do you know one of the other names just to carry on the Chelsea link who they've been linked with?
No, I don't know.
Sterling.
Sterling, Sterling, that was it. Yeah. Oh God, Sterling. This is like this isn't the team. This isn't the team where you rediscover that I saw Sterling was linked with Fulham. Now that I could get behind.
Mhm.
Fulham, Marco Silva had had a bit of continuity, know how they're playing, that sort of thing. Whereas this just seems like he'd be he'd be another aging person just coming into this team.
Yeah.
Nah, nah, mate, what are you doing?
The final thing I would say, to get back to the practical points we're trying to deliver here, is that they seem to be heavily in the market for a new number one. So I would personally be steering well clear of Areola on draft day. There've been quite a few names mentioned. The only familiar name is Mads Hermansen, who we will be familiar with from Leicester last year. The rumours for that are quite hot. I know they were looking at a couple of a little bit more exotic options too, but he's the main name, and I would guess the sort of money that's been banded around, kind of 20 million, 25 million, if they do bring in someone, then they would be the number one. So unless they sign someone in the next couple of days or sign someone before your draft, let someone else pick up Areola. It's not a guarantee, but it's just not a risk worth taking when your sole purpose on draft day in terms of the keepers is just to get starters who you're not going to have to mess about with. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And just to round out the joke, I'm sure Chelsea can appear on the scene with a goalkeeper to sell. So
I'm sure they've got a few.
come West Ham, come for the shop. Um, cool. Over to Wolves. And if we thought West Ham was a dour note to start rounding out this pod, Wolves is, I think, even worse.
See, this is where we're going to clash. See, I think West Ham is is the lowest. I mean, in terms of what they look like in the business they've done, I think Wolves are quietly cooking, But go off on your.
Yeah, okay. So Sarabia and Guedes have just left, but more notably, Eight Nori has just left. I'm forgetting the other big big loss as well.
Cunha.
Cunha. Cunha has just left. Previous season, it was Kilman and Neto. I'm sure previous season it was someone like Semedo's also left as well. Yeah, but Wolves are basically in a position where they're selling their best two players at the end of each season and not really replacing them. I know they have signed Arias this season, but I could think of the last two seasons where it's like really big names: Kilman, Neto, Cunha, Eight Nori. Those are their four best players over the last two seasons, and they've sold them with not much to replace them. Like they've got Fer Lopez in. Looking at his stats, he's not going to set the world alight. Strand Larson is one of their signings this season, but actually it's just a loan that they made permanent. Yeah, I last season had them down very close to the relegation spots, and they were just saved by Spurs and United being even worse. And I think Wolves could be flirting around with that area of the table again this season. But you told me we're going to clash, so tell me, what do you think?
Well, look, I don't think Wolves are going to be qualifying for the Champions League this season. But I think, and I can't remember who we were talking about, that the idea that there are many teams worse than they are. And that's what I think. I think there are a load of teams who are worse than them. I think they are a thin squad, but again, they don't have European football. They've only got domestic games to play. So, like half a dozen teams we've mentioned, yeah, there are a couple of big injuries away from struggling. But like I said, you could put a lot of teams in that
Yeah,
boat.
for sure.
And a team in their position and their stature at the moment can't afford to be having like for like backups in every position, and they don't need to. And players would become pretty disgruntled pretty quickly if they weren't getting game time. So yeah, they've cashed in on Cunha. I think from business side, they cashed in at the perfect time, in my opinion. I think the same for Eight Nori. I don't think Eight Nori could be any more than what he was the last couple of years at Wolves. So take the money, cash in, let him do what he
Yeah,
needs to do. Yeah, defensively, they obviously added Agbadu in January. I think was a good addition. I feel like they're probably a centre-back short, just for a bit of cover, considering they play with three. And I had a little fiddle around with the squad after you put it together and put Doherty as a right centre-back cover option, because that's where predominantly I think we're seeing him play from now on. So yeah, they've just added Wolf, a new left back from the Dutch league, who I'll be honest, I don't know a huge amount about, but could see him getting a lot of minutes. And then on the right side, we're not really sure. It looks like Hoover is going to be the starting right wing back, but it's by no means guaranteed, which isn't great when we're trying to draft teams. But are you really looking to draft the Wolves right wing back on draft day? Probably not. So that's one we can just wait and see. Obviously, Wolves' opening game of the season is Manchester City. So apart from the goalkeeper and apart from Strand Larsen, there's very much a case that all of the other Wolves players will be sat in the waiver pile ahead of game week 2. So yeah, which is good. It gives me some ammunition to talk about game week preview when that comes around for game week 2. But yeah, I think Lopez and Arias, and I covered these both in our Hidden Gem transfer video. So for the kind of the in-depth analysis and my thoughts on them, then go and check that video out. But I think they both complement each other really well. Arias, they kind of know what they're buying. Lopez is a bit more of a rough diamond, but I think, yeah, they complement each other. Arias took a really good goal in pre-season a couple of days ago, broke through from that kind of left, basically broke through in that Cunha position, and did a really, really nice finish. And I think Strand Larsen is a very, very solid number 9 option to pick up on draft day. Again, there will be draft teams out there, just depending on the way the chips fell, where Strand Larsen could be your main forward option going into the season, which I think you could do a lot worse. And like we just said, you could be going into the season with Fulkrug as your main striker if you happen to dodge them in the opening round or two. So yeah, I really like Strand Larsen. I think he will have a better season this year than he did last year, even without Cunha, because yeah, I don't think Cunha really. I think in a way, as much as he's got that individual quality, he's not your prototypical team player. Like I said on the other day, he loves a pot shot from outside the box. And a player that's taking pot shots from outside the box, more often than not, probably should be squaring it, probably should be laying it off to the wing back to cross into the middle. Obviously he scored a few of them last season, but that's partly why we both think he's not going to do as well. But yeah, Lopez, like I said in the Hidden Gem video, those that follow La Liga kind of felt like La Liga was losing a real talent, which I know is a very subjective analysis, but he's got all the things there. It's just whether he can do it in the Premier League. So, and then you've got Minetzi and Bellegarde, who we've slotted in centre mid there. Both of them really can cover those advanced state number 10 positions if they need to. So they're pretty nice players to have in terms of your squad building, and the fact that they were able to offload Sarabia and Guedes is a plus. But if they lost Strand Larsen, they are gonna struggle. They've got Kalacic in there who had a big injury. I think it was an ACL in
Twice.
season. Yeah, twice. Um, so his numbers aren't particularly good. And then they've got the other guy with the hair. What's he called? Fabio Silva, who again, he doesn't look any, if they suddenly had to go with one of those, they would seriously struggle. But I think their first choice best 11 will give lots of teams problems. So
Yeah, I think you've convinced me somewhat.
I can't remember where we put them, but I mean, I'm guessing you put them much lower than me in your.
So if I go through my last bottom six, I've got West Ham 15th, Sunderland 16th, Brentford 17th, just staying up, and then Wolves I had at 18th.
Oh, so
I really
Wolves
didn't
going
rate
down.
Wolves. I had Wolves going down, but actually I think your pitch of Strand Larson, I actually really I agree with, in the sense that I thought he was an excellent striker last season.
You think of all the teams that don't have a Strand Larsen.
That's exactly it. And I think that just if you're just looking at his stats from last season, 14 goals, 4 assists in the Premier League, that is enough
does that
to
again.
Basically you're staying up. I don't expect a lot from the rest of the team. Anyone thinking that Chan is going to revert to maybe some of the performances we saw, maybe the season before last, I just don't see it. So yeah, season ago was 125 points, 12 goals, and he had a really hot streak with 3 assists as well. But last season, just couldn't get a look in, and I think that's it. I just don't see him playing very much. Or even if Strand Larsen would get injured, I'd maybe Chan will play in that position. But yeah, not worth drafting for me. So yeah, I think you've
Where did I
convinced
have him
me.
in my Premier League? Have you got it? Yeah, so Draft FC Taz had Wolves in 14th. Oh, I also had them in 14th, to be fair. So,
I think, a striker like Strand Larsen can get you very far. And I would be happy with him as my number one. I think I would still be trying to complement him very quickly with another striker, but I'd be very happy with my number one, way more than if it was Fulkrug.
Yeah. And I think Wolves will feature heavily after game week 1. So they follow up their opening game against City. They've got Bournemouth away and then a home game against Everton. And then in game week 5, they've got a home game against Leeds, who I think are going to be one of the worst teams in the league. So, yeah, I think a lot of these names are worth keeping an eye on because I think we will be, the Joao Gomez for a couple of weeks to get those defensive contribution points. Certainly going to be on the menu. Okay, well, we'll leave that there. There's 5 teams. That's the most we've squeezed into one of these. So hopefully you stuck with us to the end. Just one more to go. Looking at the newly promoted teams, Sunderland, Leeds and Burnley. Obviously, a couple of those teams we are somewhat familiar with. There'll be some familiar faces and names on there. Sunderland, well, we're not so familiar with Sunderland, but there are certainly some names and faces that we will be familiar with in there. And so look out for that one in the coming days. Again, I'll remind you, if you are struggling, if you're leaving your draft prep late in the day, if watching this episode has just got you more shook than anything, then sign up at draftfc.co.uk and get access to all the stuff that we mentioned at the beginning. If you enjoy these pods, these videos, then give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and drop a comment on anything that you agree or disagree with, or players that we simply didn't mention at all that you feel are worth a mention. I generally respond to most comments at the moment, given how in the thick of it we are. So yeah, leave things there, and until next time, stay shook.
Stay shook.